Move it, Grandma. This isn't your welfare office. People like you don't belong in real banks. Officer Ray Denton ripped the check from Evelyn Harper's hands and laughed as it fluttered to the floor. 70 years old, and still trying to steal what you didn't earn, he sneered, snapping the cuffs so tight her fingers went numb. His breath smelled of coffee and contempt as he shoved her down. This bank isn't your charity, and I'm not your babysitter. Her heart hammered, but she stayed silent, eyes fixed on the scuffed boots behind her, belonging to a man who knew exactly how many seconds it takes to end a career when arrogance meets the wrong witness. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The morning sun slanted through Harbor Federal Bank's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Evelyn Harper stood in line, her arthritis-stiffened fingers holding her late husband's pension check. The paper trembled slightly in her grip, but her spine remained straight, her dignity intact despite the growing unease in her stomach. When it was finally her turn, Lydia Barnes, the young teller, barely glanced up. "How can I help you?" Her tone was flat, rehearsed. "Good morning," Evelyn said warmly, sliding the check and her ID across the counter. "I'd like to cash this check, please." Lydia picked up Evelyn's driver's license, squinting at it with exaggerated scrutiny. "This seems—" She paused, letting the word hang. "Could you verify your address again?" "It's the same as it's been for 40 years, dear. 1247 Maple Street." Behind Evelyn, Isaiah Cole shifted his weight slightly, his training allowing him to maintain a casual stance while cataloging every detail. His eyes tracked the security camera positions, noting their angles. He counted 4 visible cameras, plus the standard behind-counter setup. A framed poster near the teller window listed various police badges, county and city, suggesting close ties with local law enforcement. Lydia's voice grew louder, more theatrical. "And you're saying this check is from your husband's pension?" "Yes," Evelyn replied, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. "As it has been every month for the past 12 years. It's just that the amount seems—" Lydia's eyes darted to her supervisor's office. "One moment, please." The other customers in line began to stir, some showing irritation at the delay, others watching with uncomfortable interest. A young mother pulled her child closer. An elderly white man in a golf shirt made a show of checking his watch. Grant Holland emerged from his office, his shirt sleeves rolled up to display an expensive watch. He leaned close to Lydia, their whispered conference just loud enough for certain words to carry. Suspicious activity. Verify the source. Potential fraud. That last word echoed in the quiet bank lobby. Evelyn's shoulders stiffened, but her voice remained measured. "Mr. Holland, I've been banking here for over 4 decades. You can check your records. This is a routine transaction." Holland's smile was thin, dismissive. "Ma'am, we have procedures we must follow. Perhaps you're confused about the origin of this check?" "I am not confused," Evelyn said firmly. "I would like to speak to the branch manager." "The manager is unavailable," Holland replied quickly, too quickly. "And given the circumstances, I believe we should involve other authorities to sort this out." Isaiah observed Holland's body language, the slight smirk, the way he positioned himself to loom over Evelyn's smaller frame. The retired SEAL's fingers flexed once, then relaxed. His face remained impassive, but his awareness heightened as Holland stepped away to make a phone call. More customers were watching now. Several had phones out, recording the scene with varying degrees of subtlety. The young mother was hurriedly gathering her things, preparing to leave. The man in the golf shirt had stopped pretending to check the time and was openly staring. Lydia's demeanor had changed completely. She'd stepped back from her window, arms crossed, looking everywhere except at Evelyn. "You'll need to wait here," she said, her voice now clipped and official. "I've done nothing wrong," Evelyn said quietly, but her hands were shaking more visibly now. She reached into her purse for her heart medication, the bottle rattling slightly as she gripped it. Isaiah noted the security guard by the door shifting his stance, one hand moving to rest near his hip. The morning sun caught the guard's badge, throwing a sharp glare across the lobby. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Holland returned, standing unnecessarily close to Evelyn. "The authorities will help us resolve this situation." His voice carried a note of satisfaction that made Isaiah's jaw tighten imperceptibly. "My husband worked 30 years at the mill," Evelyn said, her voice clear enough to carry across the now silent lobby. "This is his pension check. The same check I've cashed here every month since he passed." "Ma'am," Holland said, emphasizing the word in a way that turned it into an insult, "if you continue to make a scene, we'll have additional problems." Through the bank's glass doors, morning traffic moved past, oblivious to the tension building inside. A mother pushed a stroller. A mail carrier sorted letters at his truck. Then, cutting through this ordinary scene, a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. The bank doors swung open with a soft whoosh. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, their boots clicking on the marble floor. "Evelyn Harper?" the taller one called out, his hand resting casually on his belt. The atmosphere in the bank crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. Phones kept recording. The security guard moved closer to the entrance. Lydia Barnes stood behind her counter, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Isaiah remained still, his training allowing him to appear relaxed, while his mind calculated distances, angles, and potential scenarios. His eyes tracked both officers' movements, noting their name tags, their body language, the way they positioned themselves to control the space. The sunlight through the windows had grown harder, casting stark shadows across Evelyn's face as she stood at the counter, her husband's pension check still lying there between her and Lydia, a simple piece of paper that had somehow become the center of this escalating storm. The 2 officers approached the counter with practiced swagger, their boots echoing on the marble floor. Officer Ray Denton took the lead, his face set in what he probably thought was authoritative concern, but came across as barely concealed satisfaction. "Step away from the counter, ma'am," Denton commanded without preamble. He didn't ask what happened, didn't check with the bank staff, didn't review the check or Evelyn's ID. His mind was already made up. "Officer, if you'll just let me explain," Evelyn began, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I said step away." Denton's voice hardened. He moved closer, invading her space. When Evelyn hesitated, trying to gather her belongings, Officer Krieger grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into her flesh as he yanked her sideways. The sudden movement sent her purse tumbling from the counter. It hit the floor with a crack, contents spilling across the polished marble. Orange prescription bottles rolled in every direction, some pills scattering free from their containers. "My medication!" Evelyn cried out. She tried to bend down, but Krieger wrenched her arm higher behind her back. "Ah!" The pain in her cry made several customers flinch. More phones came out, their cameras recording the scene. The young mother covered her child's eyes. The man in the golf shirt had backed away, but his phone was steady, capturing everything. Isaiah stood motionless, his military training evident in his controlled breathing and calculating gaze. His eyes locked onto Denton's badge number, 4487, Krieger's 3921. He noted how Krieger's grip was deliberately placed to cause maximum discomfort, how Denton positioned himself to block the main security camera's view. "Please," Evelyn said, her voice strained. "My heart condition. I need those pills." Krieger's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Sure you do. Probably confused about those too, aren't you? Just like you're confused about this check?" "I'm not confused about anything," Evelyn insisted, dignity intact despite her awkward position. "This is harassment, plain and simple." "Resisting arrest," Denton announced loudly, playing to his audience. He pulled his handcuffs free with theatrical flourish. "And potentially assaulting an officer." Isaiah's jaw clenched as he watched Denton snap the cuffs on far tighter than necessary. The metal bit into Evelyn's delicate wrists, but she didn't cry out again. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her head remained high. Lydia Barnes had retreated from her window, suddenly fascinated by her computer screen. She wouldn't look at Evelyn now, wouldn't acknowledge the scene she had instigated, but there was satisfaction in the slight curve of her lips, in the way she held herself. "Officer," Evelyn tried one more time, "I have identification, bank records, everything to prove—" "You have the right to remain silent," Denton cut her off, voice dripping with mock formality. "I suggest you use it." The sunlight through the windows felt colder now, harsher. It caught the metal of the handcuffs, the badges, the scattered pills on the floor. Isaiah observed how Krieger kept unnecessary pressure on Evelyn's arm, how Denton's free hand rested casually on his weapon, a subtle threat to anyone considering intervention. More customers had backed away, forming a loose circle around the scene. Their phones captured every moment. The small, dignified elderly woman in handcuffs, her spilled medication, the two towering officers, the bank staff's deliberate indifference. The security guard had moved to block the entrance, ensuring no one could leave or enter without police approval. "This is how you treat a grandmother," someone in the crowd muttered, but not loudly enough to draw attention. Denton heard it anyway. His smile widened. "Age doesn't excuse criminal behavior," he announced to the room. "Neither does confusion or—" He paused meaningfully. "Other factors." Isaiah's fingers flexed once, then relaxed. His combat-trained mind had already mapped out 14 ways to neutralize both officers without permanent damage. But he remained still, understanding that immediate intervention would only make things worse. Timing mattered. Justice required patience. Krieger started moving Evelyn toward the exit, his grip still unnecessarily tight. Her sensible shoes clicked softly on the marble floor, echoing in the tense silence. She passed her scattered belongings without looking down, her dignity a shield against their cruelty. "Wait!" A new voice cut through the tension. "Stop this immediately!" A well-dressed man in his 50s burst from the back offices, almost running across the lobby. His name tag identified him as James Morton, senior branch manager. His face was flushed with alarm as he took in the scene. "Everyone just calm down," Morton called out, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "There's been a misunderstanding." Elaine Porter's heels clicked rapidly across the marble floor as she hurried from her office, her face a mask of professional concern. She carried a stack of papers, waving them like a white flag. "Officers, please, I've verified everything." Her voice carried authority despite her breathlessness. "The pension check is completely legitimate. We have Mrs. Harper's full transaction history right here." Denton's grip on Evelyn's arm didn't loosen. "Ma'am, we've got a situation here." "No, you don't." Elaine's tone sharpened. She thrust the papers forward. "This is a valid check from Midwest Manufacturing's pension fund. Mrs. Harper's late husband worked there for 32 years. She cashes his pension check here every month." The lobby had grown uncomfortably quiet. Phones still recorded. Isaiah watched Denton's face darken as he realized his mistake was being documented. "Remove the handcuffs," Elaine ordered. "Now." Krieger looked to his partner, uncertain. Denton's jaw worked back and forth before he finally reached for his keys. The cuffs came off with a harsh click. Evelyn slowly brought her hands forward, wincing. Angry red marks circled her wrists, already darkening to bruises. She rubbed them gently, her movements careful and deliberate. "Mrs. Harper," Elaine began, her voice softening to a carefully measured tone. "On behalf of Harbor Federal, I want to express our deepest regrets for this unfortunate misunderstanding." Isaiah noted how she avoided placing blame, how her words danced around any admission of wrongdoing. Professional damage control? Nothing more. "Your check will be cashed immediately, of course," Elaine continued, "and we'll waive all fees for the next 6 months as a gesture of goodwill." "That won't be necessary," Evelyn said quietly. She bent down, slowly gathering her scattered pills. No one moved to help her except Isaiah, who knelt beside her with quiet efficiency. "Ma'am," Denton cut in, his voice hard with wounded pride, "let me remind you that causing disturbances in financial institutions is a serious offense. We'll overlook it this time, but future incidents. Future incidents? Isaiah spoke for the first time, his voice low but carrying clearly across the lobby. He stood, Evelyn's medications carefully organized in his hands. You mean like exercising her legal right to cash a legitimate check? Denton's hand twitched toward his weapon, but Krieger touched his arm. The crowd was still watching, still recording. The moment stretched taut as a tripwire. We're done here, Krieger muttered. Come on. The officers retreated, their boots no longer echoing with authority. Denton paused at the door, looking back at Evelyn with unconcealed hostility. Be more careful next time, ma'am. We might not be so understanding. Elaine quickly stepped between them. I'll personally escort Mrs. Harper to my office to complete her transaction. No, Evelyn's voice was faint but firm. I need some air. She took an unsteady step toward the exit. Isaiah moved closer, noticing how she pressed one hand to her chest, how her breathing had grown shallow and quick. Mrs. Harper? He kept his voice gentle. Would you like some help outside? She nodded, accepting his arm. Together they walked slowly toward the doors, past the watching crowd, past the security guard who suddenly couldn't meet their eyes. The morning sun was harsh after the bank's dim interior. Evelyn's steps faltered as they reached a concrete planter. She gripped it for support, her breathing increasingly labored. Ma'am? Isaiah steadied her. Should I call an ambulance? They've been watching me, she whispered. For years now. Ever since I found those discrepancies in the books. What discrepancies? At the plant, before it closed. Her words came in gasps. They think I still have proof. Mrs. Harper? Elaine had followed them outside. Are you all right? Call 911, Isaiah ordered, helping Evelyn sit on the planter's edge. She needs medical attention. Elaine pulled out her phone, stepping away to make the call. Isaiah stayed close to Evelyn, monitoring her breathing, noting how her left arm trembled. I'm Isaiah, he said softly. Isaiah Cole. I've got some medical training. Try to take slow breaths for me. Isaiah. She managed a weak smile. Thank you for staying, for seeing. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Evelyn's breathing remained shallow and quick. Isaiah kept his hand steady under her elbow, a quiet anchor in the chaos. They won't stop, she whispered. Not until... Save your strength, Isaiah murmured. We'll talk later. The ambulance pulled up, lights flashing. Paramedics jumped out, equipment in hand. They worked quickly, efficiently, loading Evelyn onto a stretcher. Her vital signs were concerning enough that they wanted immediate transport. I'll ride with her, Isaiah told them, his tone brooking no argument. He helped secure the stretcher, then climbed into the ambulance. As the doors began to close, he glanced back at the bank one last time. The security camera mounted above the entrance moved slightly, its lens rotating away from the scene. Someone inside was already managing evidence, controlling the narrative. Isaiah's face remained impassive, but his eyes hardened with recognition. He'd seen this pattern before, the calculated humiliation, the masked cruelty, the subtle cleanup afterward. The ambulance doors closed with a final thunk. Through the small windows, Isaiah watched Harbor Federal recede as they pulled away, its polished columns and gleaming windows hiding secrets that were about to become his personal mission. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of Memorial Hospital's third floor, Isaiah Cole stood in the hallway, his back against the wall, watching medical personnel come and go. His stance was relaxed but alert, a habit from years of training that never quite faded. Through the half-open door, he could see Evelyn Harper's small form in the hospital bed, finally resting after hours of tests and monitoring. Dr. Sarah Martinez emerged from the room, clipboard in hand. She moved directly to Isaiah, having recognized him as the steady presence who'd stayed through admission. Mr. Cole? Her voice was low, professional. Mrs. Harper is stable now, but I need to be clear about something. The stress she experienced today could have killed her. Her heart showed signs of significant strain. Isaiah nodded once. What's her prognosis? With proper medication and rest, She should recover. But Dr. Martinez's expression hardened. Another incident like this could trigger cardiac arrest. She mentioned this wasn't the first time she's been harassed? No. Isaiah's voice remained neutral, but his eyes flickered with contained anger. It wasn't. Well, it needs to be the last. Her body can't take this kind of stress. She glanced at her clipboard. We'll keep her overnight for observation. She's asked about her purse and personal items several times. They're still at the bank? I'll retrieve them. Isaiah straightened from the wall. Does she need anything else? Just rest, and someone watching out for her. Dr. Martinez gave him a measuring look. Are you family? No. Just a witness who stayed. Well, she's lucky you did. She handed him a prescription slip. Her heart medication needs to be refilled. The pharmacy downstairs is still open. Isaiah took the slip, committing the medication name to memory. I'll handle it. He walked quietly into Evelyn's room. She stirred at his approach, her eyes opening slowly. I'm going to get your things from the bank, he said softly. And your prescription. Do you need anything else? No, thank you. Her voice was tired but clearer than before. You've done so much already. Try to rest. I won't be long. The drive back to Harbor Federal took 15 minutes. The bank was closed, but Isaiah had already called ahead. A security guard met him at the side entrance with Evelyn's purse and a sealed envelope, probably some kind of official apology crafted by their legal team. Back in his motel room an hour later, Isaiah sat on the edge of the bed, television playing quietly. He'd delivered Evelyn's belongings and medication, made sure she was comfortable, and left his number with both her and the nursing staff. Now, he watched the local news with growing disgust. Incident at Harbor Federal Bank this morning, the anchor was saying. The police department has issued a statement regarding the arrest of an elderly woman who allegedly became aggressive during a routine transaction. The screen showed Officer Denton speaking from the police station steps. The subject appeared disoriented and combative when questioned about suspicious documentation. Officers attempted to de-escalate the situation, but she became increasingly agitated. While we regret any distress caused, our officers followed proper procedure to ensure everyone's safety. Isaiah's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone, quickly finding what he'd expected. Edited body cam footage already circulating online. He watched it carefully, noting the obvious cuts, the missing angles, the convenient gaps in audio. Years of reviewing mission footage made the manipulation clear to him. His phone rang. Evelyn's hospital room number flashed on the screen. Mrs. Harper? They're saying terrible things. Her voice shook. On the news, online. People are calling the hospital, leaving messages. They're saying I tried to commit fraud, that I attacked those officers. She broke down, crying. Why are they doing this? They're trying to control the story, Isaiah said quietly. To protect themselves. The bank. She took a shuddering breath. They sent someone. A notice. I'm banned from all Harbor Federal locations. They say I'm a security risk. Isaiah's free hand curled into a fist. He forced it to relax. Try not to watch the news right now. Focus on resting. What am I going to do? That's where George's pension check. We'll figure it out, he assured her. One step at a time. After calming her as best he could, Isaiah hung up and opened his laptop. He began documenting everything methodically. Times, names, badge numbers, witness positions. He added screenshots of the edited footage, noting timestamps where cuts occurred. His training had taught him the value of detailed intelligence gathering. He'd planned to leave town tomorrow, head west to start his retirement. Those plans felt distant now, irrelevant. Something was very wrong in this town, something that went deeper than one incident of racism at a bank. Evelyn's whispered words about discrepancies and being watched nagged at him. His phone buzzed with a news alert just before midnight. He read it twice, his expression unchanging but his eyes growing cold. Local police issue arrest warrant for Evelyn Harper. Charges include attempting to pass forged documents and resisting arrest. The phone creaked in his grip. He set it down carefully, deliberately, before he could break it. They were moving faster than he'd expected, using the night shift to push through paperwork while Evelyn was hospitalized and vulnerable. It was an efficient strategy. He'd used similar tactics himself in darker times. Isaiah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. A patrol car rolled past slowly, its lights off. They were probably already watching the hospital, waiting for her release. The system was closing ranks, following a familiar pattern he'd seen in corrupted institutions worldwide. He pulled out a small notebook and began writing, his movements precise and controlled. Names, locations, connection points. The foundation of what would become a mission plan, though he hadn't admitted that to himself yet. In the background, the news continued to spin its narrative, but Isaiah wasn't listening anymore. He was remembering other missions. Other times he'd dismantled systems from within. The red and blue lights painted harsh shadows across Evelyn Harper's small yellow bungalow. Officer Ray Denton climbed out of his patrol car, warrant in hand, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. His partner, Paul Krieger, flanked him as they strode up the narrow concrete path toward the front door. From behind a large oak tree across the street, Isaiah Cole watched, his phone already recording. He'd driven straight here after a nurse called to warn him that Evelyn had checked herself out against medical advice, desperate to get home to her medication and familiar surroundings. But he'd arrived 3 minutes too late. "Mrs. Harper!" Denton's voice boomed through the quiet neighborhood. "Police! Open up!" The porch light clicked on. Through the screen door, Isaiah could see Evelyn's slight figure, wrapped in a housecoat. Her hand trembled as she pushed the door open. "Officer Denton?" Her voice was thin, uncertain. "What's happening?" "We have a warrant for your arrest." Denton thrust the paper at her. "Step outside, please." "But I just got home from the hospital," Evelyn protested softly. "My heart—" "Now, Mrs. Harper." Krieger moved forward, hand on his cuffs. "Don't make this difficult." Porch lights began switching on up and down the street. Curtains twitched. Neighbors emerged onto their front steps, but no one spoke up. No one moved to help. Isaiah's jaw clenched as he steadied his phone, documenting every moment. "Can I at least get my medication?" Evelyn asked. "You can sort that out at the station." Denton grabbed her arm, exactly where the bruises from earlier still marked her skin. She winced, but didn't cry out. Isaiah's free hand curled into a fist as he watched them cuff her again. His training screamed at him to intervene, but he forced himself to stay hidden. Raw footage would be more valuable than a confrontation right now. "Evelyn Harper," Denton recited loudly, clearly playing to his audience of neighbors. "You're under arrest for attempting to pass forged documents, resisting arrest, and making false statements to law enforcement. Those charges are lies," Evelyn said, her voice stronger now despite her obvious fear. "You know they're lies." "Watch yourself," Krieger warned, tightening the cuffs. "You're just making it worse." They led her to the patrol car, Denton's grip unnecessarily rough. Isaiah noticed how they angled her head down, a practiced move to make her look guilty to the watching crowd. As they drove away, he counted 4 other patrol cars circling the block, a show of force meant to intimidate the whole neighborhood. Isaiah waited 5 minutes, then drove to the police station. The booking process would take at least an hour. He parked across the street, watching officers come and go, noting shift changes and security patterns. At exactly midnight, he walked in. The desk sergeant looked up with obvious recognition. "Can I help you?" "I'm here about Evelyn Harper." "Booking's not finished. No visitors." "When will she be released?" The sergeant's expression hardened. "That's not your concern." "She needs medical attention," Isaiah said evenly. "She has a heart condition. Our medical staff will evaluate her." A new voice spoke from behind him. Officer Denton approached, coffee in hand. "You know, Mr. Cole, for someone who just happened to be in line at the bank, you seem awfully invested in Mrs. Harper's situation." Isaiah turned slowly, his stance relaxed but ready. "Just a concerned citizen." "Well, here's some friendly advice." Denton stepped closer. Coffee forgotten. This is a small town. We look after our own. Whatever you think you're doing here, whatever you think you saw, mind your business. Go back to wherever you came from. Is that a threat, Officer Denton? That's professional courtesy. Denton's smile didn't reach his eyes. Don't make me get unprofessional. Isaiah held his gaze for 3 long seconds, then turned and walked out. He could feel multiple sets of eyes tracking him through the glass doors. In his car, he sat quietly for several minutes, processing. The speed of escalation, the coordination between bank and police, the prepared media response. This wasn't just corruption, it was practiced corruption. Back in his motel room, Isaiah pulled a heavy black duffel bag from under the bed. The lock clicked open under his thumbprint. Inside, beneath a false bottom, lay the carefully preserved evidence of 20 years of service. Medals, classified mission reports, commendations signed by presidents. Deeper still were the documents that mattered now. Files on financial networks, corruption patterns, the methodology of institutional rot. He spread the materials across the bed methodically. His training had taught him to analyze before acting, to understand systems before dismantling them. The same techniques he'd used to collapse terrorist cells could work here. Find the pressure points, identify the key players, gather leverage, then apply force precisely. Isaiah pinned a map to the wall, marking the bank, police station, and city hall. He added sticky notes with names, connecting them with red thread. Patterns emerged. The pension fund, the manufacturing plant closure, Evelyn's old bookkeeping job, 20 years of small-town corruption crystallizing around a single point of resistance. An elderly black woman who'd noticed the wrong numbers in the wrong ledger. A car drove past his window, slow and deliberate. He didn't need to look to know it was a patrol car. They'd be watching him now, assessing the threat. Good. Let them waste resources on surveillance while he worked. Through the thin motel walls, Isaiah could hear the morning news starting up in the next room. More lies would be spreading across breakfast tables and phone screens. More pressure would be applied to Evelyn's already weakened heart. The system was tightening its grip, confident in its power, certain of its impunity. As the first gray light of dawn crept through his window, Isaiah began to plan. The sun hadn't fully risen when Isaiah Cole straightened the last piece of red thread on his motel room wall. He'd slept exactly 2 hours, military habits keeping his mind sharp despite exhaustion. Coffee from the ancient machine tasted like burnt plastic, but he drank it anyway, studying his work. The wall told a story, not just of yesterday's incident, but of something deeper. Harbor Federal's expansion timeline, police pension fund reports, city council minutes spanning 2 decades. Something had happened at that factory, and Evelyn Harper had seen it. Isaiah checked his watch, 7:15 a.m. The county clerk's office would open at 8. He showered quickly, chose plain clothes that wouldn't draw attention, and headed out. His rental car started on the first try, but he noticed fresh tire marks where a vehicle had parked outside his room overnight. They were watching, which meant they were worried. The Harbor Federal Records Office occupied a corner of the main branch, the same one where they'd arrested Evelyn. Isaiah walked in like he belonged there, nodding to the security guard. The public records terminal sat unused, its ancient screen glowing blue in the morning light. "Can I help you?" A young clerk approached, her smile professional but wary. "Just need to check some property records," Isaiah said, his voice calm and forgettable. "Research for a real estate project." He spent 40 minutes scrolling through digitized documents, taking pictures with his phone when no one was watching. The pattern jumped out immediately. Harbor Federal had acquired 6 failed businesses in the past 15 years, including the old manufacturing plant where Evelyn had worked. Each closure followed the same timeline: financial irregularities, sudden layoffs, quick sales. The county clerk's office proved even more interesting. Isaiah signed in as a title researcher and buried his real searches between legitimate property lookups. The manufacturing plant's closure had triggered a wave of foreclosures, all handled by the same law firm. Properties resold at fraction prices to shell companies that traced back to familiar names. Holland, Porter, names that matched his wall of red thread. By 10 o'clock, Isaiah had enough background. He drove to the police station, parking in clear view of the cameras. Inside, the desk sergeant from last night had been replaced by a younger officer who didn't hide his suspicion. "I'm here to see Evelyn Harper," Isaiah stated. "Visiting hours aren't until—" "She has a right to visitors. I'll wait." 20 minutes passed before they led him to a small room with scratched plexiglass. When they brought Evelyn in, Isaiah's jaw tightened. She looked collapsed somehow, smaller than yesterday, her wrists visibly swollen from the cuffs. But her eyes still held that quiet dignity. "Isaiah?" Her voice crackled through the speaker. "You shouldn't be here. How are you feeling?" "They gave me some of my medication." She touched her chest. "Not all of it." A guard shifted closer, pretending to check his phone while listening. Isaiah lowered his voice. "Tell me about the factory, Evelyn." "About the books you kept." Her eyes darted to the guard, then back. "That was a long time ago." "But you remember." "Numbers don't lie," she said carefully. "Even when people do. I was good at my job. Too good, maybe. The payroll accounts. There were discrepancies. Money moving where it shouldn't. I reported it through proper channels." She smiled sadly. 2 weeks later, the plant announced it was closing. 400 people lost their jobs overnight. And the records? Destroyed in a small fire. Very convenient. Her hands trembled slightly. "The next day, my house was broken into. Nothing taken, just searched. Then my tires were slashed. Then my son's scholarship was suddenly revoked." She leaned forward. "Isaiah, please, go home. This town, it knows how to hurt people without leaving marks." The guard stepped closer. "Time's up," Isaiah stood. "I'll be back." "Don't," Evelyn whispered. "Please, I'm old. I'm tired. They win." Outside, Isaiah spotted the patrol car immediately. Third pass in 15 minutes. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. He drove to his next stop, the law offices of Ellis and Associates. Marjorie Ellis's office occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian house. The secretary tried to turn him away, but Isaiah simply sat in the waiting room until Marjorie appeared, elegant in a charcoal suit that couldn't hide her exhaustion. "Mr. Cole," she gestured him inside. "I assume this is about Evelyn Harper. You're withdrawing from her case." "Doctor's orders." Marjorie closed the door. "Blood pressure issues. Very sudden." "Like the factory closure was sudden?" Her expression didn't change, but her hand tightened on her desk chair. "That's ancient history." "Not to them." Isaiah stayed standing. "How did they approach you? Phone call? Visit? Or just a friendly reminder about your daughter's job at City Hall?" "Mr. Cole." Marjorie's voice dropped. "I've spent 30 years defending people in this town. I know which battles can be won. This isn't one of them. Whatever you're planning, don't. The consequences already started." Isaiah turned to leave. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Ellis. They'll destroy her to keep this quiet." "No." Isaiah paused at the door. "They won't." Back at the motel, Isaiah added Marjorie's name to his wall. Connected, but compromised. A victim and a warning. He worked through the afternoon, building his case piece by piece. The factory's employee list, the pension fund transfers, the property sales. A pattern of corruption so deep it had become the town's foundation. The sun set. Isaiah cleaned his weapon, more from habit than necessity. He wasn't here for violence, not yet. Information was his first weapon. Pressure points, leverage. The right documents in the right hands could do more damage than bullets. At exactly 11:47 p.m., footsteps approached his door. Heavy boots on cheap carpet. They stopped, lingering, waiting. Isaiah set his laptop aside, eyes fixed on the door. The fluorescent lights of Mercer's grocery cast harsh shadows across the empty parking lot. Isaiah Cole stepped through the automatic doors, A single plastic bag swinging from his left hand. Ground coffee, protein bars, bottled water. Simple supplies that would keep him going. The night air carried a hint of coming rain. He'd chosen this store carefully, far enough from his motel to break any surveillance pattern, close enough to walk if needed. The backlot offered 3 escape routes, and the security cameras were old enough to have predictable blind spots. Isaiah had noted all this automatically, the way he noted everything. Old habits kept you alive. The crunch of gravel behind the store made him pause. Not random footsteps, deliberate placement, trying to be quiet, but not quite managing it. Isaiah continued walking, his pace unchanged. He felt the presence of watchers, the weight of hostile eyes. The bag in his hand could become a weapon if needed. So could the pen in his pocket, or the brick wall, or the dumpster's metal edge. They made their move as he passed the loading dock. 2 shapes detached from the shadows, moving with the confidence of men used to having power. Even in civilian clothes, Isaiah recognized their swagger immediately: Officer Denton and Officer Krieger. No badges tonight, no body cameras, no witnesses. Going somewhere. Denton's voice carried that familiar sneer. Isaiah set his grocery bag down carefully. "Evening, officers." Krieger circled to his left, while Denton stepped closer. "Told you to mind your business." "Did you?" Isaiah kept his voice neutral, letting his body language project confusion and hint of fear. Let them think they had the advantage. Let them commit. The first shove came from Denton, hard enough to slam Isaiah back against the brick wall. He let it happen, absorbing the impact, reading their positions. Krieger moved in tighter, blocking the most obvious escape route. Their positioning was practiced. They'd done this before, probably dozens of times. "Last chance," Denton growled. "Leave town tonight. Forget about the old lady." Or Isaiah saw the punch coming, telegraphed by Denton's shoulder tension. He could have blocked it, dodged it, countered it. Instead, he took it, letting his head snap back against the bricks. The pain was sharp, but manageable. More importantly, it told him everything he needed to know about Denton's reach, power, and control. Krieger laughed. "Not so tough now, huh?" Isaiah spat blood onto the concrete. Then he moved. The first 5 seconds were pure economy of motion. He grabbed Krieger's extended arm, twisted hard at the exact angle where the wrist bones couldn't resist, and felt the satisfying snap. Before Krieger's scream could fully form, Isaiah drove his knee up into Denton's groin, then hammered an elbow into his throat. Both men staggered. Isaiah gave them no time to recover. He flowed through the darkness like water, using every shadow, every obstacle. A dumpster became cover. A drain pipe became leverage. The narrow space between buildings became a funnel that forced them to come at him one at a time. Each movement was precise, calculated, designed to end the threat as efficiently as possible. Krieger came at him wild, good hand swinging. Isaiah caught the punch, redirected it into the wall, then drove his palm up into Krieger's elbow. Another crack, another scream. Krieger collapsed, clutching his mangled arm. The flash of steel caught Isaiah's eye. Denton had pulled a knife, its blade gleaming dully in the security lights. The officer slashed forward, technique sloppy with rage and fear. Isaiah stepped inside the arc, trapped Denton's wrist, and applied pressure to exactly the right nerve cluster. The knife clattered to the ground. "What the fu—" Denton's words cut off as Isaiah swept his legs, driving him face down onto the asphalt. Isaiah knelt, one knee pressing into Denton's spine. The officer's arm bent at a painful angle. He leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper. "I could kill you both right now. You know that, don't you?" Denton struggled weakly. Isaiah increased the pressure until he felt tendons start to separate. "Next time won't end this clean," Isaiah continued, his tone conversational. "Next time, I take everything. Your badge, your pension, your freedom. I have the factory records, Denton. I know about the money." One phone call, and it all burns down. He shifted his weight, driving his knee into a cluster of nerve endings that sent lightning bolts of pain through Denton's body. The officer went rigid, then limp. "Tell your friends," Isaiah said. "Tell everyone. The old lady is off limits." He stood smoothly, retrieving his grocery bag from where he'd set it down. Krieger lay curled around his shattered arm, whimpering. Denton hadn't moved, but his breathing was steady. They'd live. They'd heal. Eventually. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Far too late to matter. Exactly as planned. Isaiah walked away unhurried, his footsteps measured and calm. He'd given them just enough to fear, just enough to question. Violence was a language they understood, but controlled violence. Precise violence. That would haunt them more than any beating. The grocery bag swung gently as he walked, its contents undisturbed. Blood trickled from his split lip, where he'd taken Denton's punch. It would bruise, but that was fine. Sometimes you had to bleed a little to sell the story. The sirens grew louder, but Isaiah knew the response time had been deliberately slow. This was their territory, their rules. They hadn't expected him to understand the game, let alone turn it against them. Now they would regroup, recalculate, try to figure out exactly what they were dealing with. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Fear was a weapon, too. Isaiah's shoes scraped softly against the concrete as he rounded the corner, leaving the parking lot's harsh lights behind. The night swallowed him completely, as it had so many times before. Behind him, red and blue flashers began to paint the walls, casting wild shadows that danced like accusations. Pink-tinged water swirled down the motel sink's drain. Isaiah Cole flexed his bruised knuckles under the cool stream, watching dried blood dissolve from the small cuts. The mirror above the sink reflected yesterday's violence. A split lip, darkening bruise along his jaw where Denton's punch had landed. He'd slept 3 hours. Enough to stay sharp. The rest of the night he'd spent making calls, pulling threads, letting old contacts know he might need them. Dawn painted the grimy window with pale light as he buttoned a fresh shirt, covering the marks on his ribs. The Paradise Diner sat just off the highway, its neon "open" sign buzzing in the early morning fog. Isaiah arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a booth with clear sightlines to both exits. The place was nearly empty. A few truckers at the counter, one elderly couple sharing toast. Thomas Reed walked in at exactly 6:30 a.m., right on time. Isaiah recognized him from the photo. Early 30s, thin face, dark circles under darting eyes. Reed's tie was crooked, and his hands wouldn't stay still. He slid into the booth across from Isaiah, immediately reaching for a menu he didn't read. Coffee? A waitress appeared, pot already tilted. "Please," Reed's voice cracked. He dumped 3 sugar packets into the cup as soon as she filled it. Isaiah waited until the waitress moved away. "Thank you for meeting me. I shouldn't be here." Reed's leg bounced under the table. "If anyone from the bank sees me, no one followed you. I made sure." Isaiah's tone was calm, steady. "Take a breath, Mr. Reed. You're doing the right thing." Reed's hands wrapped around his coffee cup like it was an anchor. "I worked IT support at Harbor Federal for 6 years. Contract position. They let me go 3 months ago. Budget cuts, they said. But I think they knew I'd seen things." "What kind of things?" "Transaction patterns. Account irregularities." Reed lowered his voice. "The bank runs quarterly audits, right? But there's this separate system that handles certain transfers, mostly involving police pension accounts. The numbers never matched." Isaiah nodded slowly. "Money laundering. Had to be. I kept backup logs. Force of habit, you know. When they fired me, they wiped my workstation. But they didn't know about my personal backups." Reed reached into his laptop bag with trembling fingers. "It's all here. Account numbers, dates, amounts. Some transfers link directly to offshore holdings." The flash drive Reed placed on the table looked ordinary. Isaiah knew it was anything but. "They'll deny everything." Reed continued. Say I fabricated the data. Try to discredit me. But I documented everything. Timestamps, authorization codes, it's bulletproof. You understand what happens next? Isaiah asked quietly. Once this goes public? Reed's face was pale but determined. I'll testify. Whatever it takes. What they did to that old lady, Mrs. Harper, it's not right. None of this is right. Isaiah pocketed the flash drive. I have a journalist contact. Regional paper, solid reputation. She'll protect your identity as long as possible, but eventually… I know what could happen. Reed's coffee had gone cold, untouched. But I can't keep looking the other way. I have kids, you know. What am I teaching them if I stay quiet? They worked out security protocols over breakfast. Neither man ate. Isaiah gave Reed a burner phone, specific check-in times, emergency procedures. By 8 a.m., the evidence was safely in the hands of Sarah Martinez, an investigative reporter Isaiah trusted. The story moved fast after that. By noon, the first online articles appeared, carefully worded, but devastating. Harbor Federal's stock price wobbled. The police department issued a terse no comment. City council members weren't answering phones. Isaiah picked up Evelyn from the county jail at 2 p.m. She looked exhausted, but unbowed, her dignity intact despite wrinkled clothes and uncombed hair. Neither spoke during the drive to her house. In Evelyn's small kitchen, Isaiah made tea while she changed clothes. Simple rituals, normal moments that felt precious after everything. When she finally sat at the worn Formica table, her hands were steady. Thomas Reed, Isaiah said, sliding a cup toward her. Name mean anything to you? Should it? Former IT contractor at Harbor Federal. He's the one who found the proof, connecting the bank to police pension fraud. Same accounts that went missing when the factory closed. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her cup. After all these years, Martinez is running the story. More outlets will pick it up by tonight. The pressure's building. They'll fight back, Evelyn said softly. They always do. Let them try. Isaiah's voice held cold certainty. This time we have proof. Through the kitchen window, they watched the first news van park across the street. Then another. Evelyn's phone started ringing. Reporters, lawyers, old friends suddenly remembering her number. I should rest, Evelyn said, looking decades older than yesterday. My heart's not what it used to be. Isaiah helped her to the living room couch, made sure her medication was within reach. She was asleep within minutes, peaceful for the first time in days. He kept watch from the window, tracking movements outside. More media arrived. A police cruiser drove past twice, not Denton or Krieger's unit. His phone buzzed with updates from Martinez. The story was gaining traction. Official statements were being demanded. Social media was catching fire. For one careful moment, Isaiah allowed himself to feel something like hope. Not victory. He'd seen too much to trust easy wins. But the pressure was building. The rot was being exposed. Sometimes that was enough to start change. His burner phone lit up with a text from Reed. They know. Morning light streamed through the courthouse's tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. The hallway buzzed with energy. Reporters clutching notepads, camera crews adjusting equipment, lawyers in sharp suits conferring in hushed tones. Isaiah stood against the wall, eyes constantly moving, tracking every entrance and exit. Evelyn sat on a wooden bench nearby, hands folded in her lap, wearing her best Sunday dress. She looked small against the courthouse's imposing architecture, but her spine was straight, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. Sarah Martinez, the investigative reporter, paced nearby, phone pressed to her ear. Her dark hair was messy from running her fingers through it, but her eyes were bright with controlled excitement. The wire services are picking it up, she whispered to Isaiah. CNN, MSNBC, they're all calling. The corridor grew more crowded by the minute. Local reporters, who'd ignored the story days ago, now jostled for position. Isaiah noticed several faces he recognized from Harbor Federal, including Elaine Porter, the manager who'd offered that hollow apology. She avoided eye contact. At exactly 10 a.m., the district attorney's office doors opened. A tall woman in a charcoal suit emerged, flanked by assistants. The crowd surged forward, microphones extended like weapons. After careful review of new evidence, the DA announced, her voice carrying over the murmurs, "The state is dropping all charges against Mrs. Evelyn Harper, pending further investigation into the circumstances surrounding her arrest." The hallway erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Isaiah moved closer to Evelyn, protective as always. "Mrs. Harper," someone called out. "How do you feel about the charges being dropped?" Evelyn rose slowly, steadied by Isaiah's hand at her elbow. Her voice was clear and strong. "I feel grateful that the truth has finally come to light." The tears started then, silent streams down her weathered cheeks as decades of tension released. She turned to Isaiah, who wrapped his arms around her carefully, mindful of her fragility. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. "It's over," she whispered against his shirt. "It's finally over." But Isaiah knew better. His jaw tightened as he watched the DA slip away without taking questions. This wasn't over, just shifting to a new phase. Martinez pushed through the crowd, practically glowing. "The story's exploding," she said. "I've got network anchors fighting for exclusives. The Federal Banking Commission is opening an inquiry. Even the governor's office is calling." Official statements began flooding in. The mayor promised a full and transparent investigation. The police chief announced an internal review of procedures. Harbor Federal's parent company expressed deep concern and suspended several employees pending investigation. By early afternoon, Isaiah had heard enough hollow promises. He helped Evelyn into a taxi home, then drove his rental car to the Edgewater Motel, 20 miles outside town. Thomas Reed was waiting in room 114, pacing between the beds. "You're doing the right thing," Isaiah said, watching Reed stuff clothes into a duffel bag. "The safe house in Atlanta is ready. My contact will meet you tomorrow." Reed's hands shook as he zipped the bag. When they shook hands goodbye, Reed held on too long, his palm damp with fear. His fingers trembled violently. "I keep thinking about my kids," Reed said. "What if—" "Don't," Isaiah cut him off. "Focus on the plan, one step at a time." But Reed's eyes were wild, darting to the window at every passing car. "They have reach, you know? Connections. Money can buy anything in this town. You're not in this town anymore." Isaiah's voice was firm. "And you're not alone." The drive back to his own motel was quiet, summer heat shimmering off the asphalt. Isaiah ran through contingency plans, security measures, escape routes, habits from his SEAL days that had kept him alive. His room was dark when he returned, the air conditioning humming. He flipped on the TV for background noise while checking his phones for updates. The local news anchor's voice suddenly cut through his thoughts. "Breaking news from the Edgewater Motel just outside city limits. Police are reporting the death of Thomas Reed, a former Harbor Federal contractor, from an apparent drug overdose. Reed was recently linked to allegations of financial misconduct." Isaiah's muscles locked. He knew instantly. The too steady hands, the violent tremors, the wild eyes. Classic signs of forced injection. They'd gotten to Reed somehow between Isaiah's departure and now. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered to silence, just soft breathing on the line. A warning. A message. The rage built slowly, methodically, like a nuclear reactor approaching critical mass. Isaiah stared at the TV screen, where police lights flashed outside the Edgewater. They showed Reed's body being wheeled out, covered in a sheet. A tragic overdose, the reporter called it. Another piece of evidence erased. The phone rang again. Still silence. Still breathing. Isaiah's controls snapped. He grabbed the TV and hurled it against the wall. The screen exploded in a shower of sparks and glass. In the sudden darkness, sirens began wailing outside his motel. Too close, too coordinated to be coincidence. They were coming for him next. But Isaiah Cole wasn't Thomas Reed. He wasn't afraid of needles in the dark. Through the broken window, red and blue lights painted the parking lot. Car doors slammed, boots on pavement. The First Baptist Church basement hummed with hopeful energy. Paper streamers hung from exposed pipes, and folding tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes. The room was packed. Church members, local activists, and even a few reporters who'd stayed in town to follow Evelyn's story. Reverend James stood at the makeshift podium, his deep voice carrying over the crowd. Tonight, we celebrate not just Sister Evelyn's vindication, but the power of truth to overcome darkness. Scattered amens punctuated his words. Evelyn sat in the front row, wearing a pale blue dress and her Sunday pearls. Her eyes were bright with tears as the community rallied around her. The fundraiser had already collected enough to cover her legal fees and lost pension payments. Isaiah lingered near the back wall, watching the doors. His ribs still ached from the motel arrest, but he'd made bail thanks to Martinez's newspaper connections. Something felt wrong. The victory had come too easily, the system's retreat too smooth. And now, Reverend James continued, I'd like to invite Sister Evelyn to say a few words. The basement doors burst open. Boots thundered down the stairs. Officer Denton led the charge, his right arm in a brace, flanked by Krieger and 4 deputies. Their faces were hard, determined. Evelyn Harper! Denton's voice cut through the shocked silence. He held up a paper. New warrant for your arrest. Conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and filing false police reports. The crowd erupted in protests. Reverend James stepped forward. Now wait just a minute. Denton shoved past him. Krieger and 2 deputies converged on Evelyn, who had risen shakily to her feet. Please, she said. I have my heart medication. They ignored her. Krieger grabbed her arm and yanked. Evelyn cried out as they forced her to the floor. Her pearls scattered across the linoleum. Isaiah's training kicked in. He moved without thinking, muscle memory from countless operations. 3 steps would get him to Evelyn, 2 seconds to disable Krieger. But he never made it. Deputies hit him from both sides. Isaiah's head cracked against a metal chair. Hands grabbed his arms as someone shouted, He's resisting! Watch out! He assaulted officers last week. Body cameras! Someone in the crowd yelled. They're turning them away! Isaiah fought to keep his arms under control as they twisted them behind his back. Steel cuffs bit into his wrists, ratcheted too tight. A knee drove into his back, grinding already bruised ribs against the floor. Isaiah! Evelyn's voice was thin with fear. Please don't hurt him. Through the chaos, Isaiah caught glimpses. Evelyn being dragged to her feet, church members held back by deputies, phones recording everything. Reverend James trying to reason with Denton. Martinez shouting questions that no one answered. On your feet! A deputy growled, hauling Isaiah up. His ribs screamed in protest. They marched him toward the stairs, past faces twisted with anger and horror. At the police station, they separated them immediately. Isaiah watched helplessly as they led Evelyn down a different hallway, her small figure surrounded by uniforms. Her eyes met his briefly, tired, afraid, but still dignified. The booking process was deliberately rough. Isaiah's fingerprints, photos, belongings catalogued and sealed. His phone disappeared into an evidence bag. The charges kept coming. Assaulting an officer, resisting arrest, conspiracy, interfering with an investigation. Subject is trained military, Denton announced loudly. Extremely dangerous. Maximum security protocols. They put Isaiah in a holding cell deep in the building's bowels. No windows. Single bulb, concrete bench. His ribs throbbed with each breath. In the distance, he heard other cell doors slamming. The system hadn't just reacted. It had planned this counterattack carefully. Wait for public sympathy to peak, then crush it with new charges. Separate the targets. Control the narrative. Isaiah had seen similar tactics in other countries, but experiencing it from the inside was different. He tested the cuffs subtly. No give. The cell was solid. They weren't taking chances after the alley fight. His carefully built network of evidence and witnesses was now cut off. No phone, no contacts, no way to warn anyone what was coming next. Hours crawled by. The holding cell's light flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows. Isaiah's training helped him track time through shift changes and distant movements. He heard fragments of radio chatter, catching phrases like federal interest and special handling protocols. Near midnight, footsteps approached. A guard Isaiah didn't recognize appeared, face expressionless. "Harper," he said flatly. "Time for processing." They led him through empty corridors to a processing room. Through a window, Isaiah glimpsed Evelyn in another room, looking small and tired as they took her fingerprints again. Their eyes met briefly through the glass before guards shifted to block the view. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as they documented every scar, every tattoo, every identifying mark. Isaiah's military ID had already marked him as high risk. They weren't just booking him, they were burying him in the system. Back in the holding cell, the main lights powered down for night shift, leaving only dim security lighting. Somewhere in the building, other cell doors clanged shut with final, echoing thuds. Isaiah sat on the concrete bench, back against the wall, mind racing through scenarios and possibilities. They'd miscalculated badly. He'd underestimated how far the corruption reached, how coordinated the response would be. Now Evelyn was alone somewhere in the building, probably terrified, possibly without her medication. And Isaiah, for the first time since leaving the SEALs, was truly trapped. The cell door's lock engaged with a heavy click. In the low light, Isaiah could barely make out his own hands. Separated, isolated, and contained. Exactly as the system intended. The holding cell's darkness pressed against Isaiah's eyes. His watch had been taken during processing, but his internal clock told him it was well past midnight. The concrete bench had long since leached away his body heat, and his ribs sent sharp protests with each shallow breath. Footsteps echoed through the corridors, guards making their rounds. Isaiah had mapped their patterns over the past hours. 3 minutes between passes. 2 guards per rotation. Standard issue boots with rubber soles. But these new footsteps were different. Lighter, less rhythmic. A small metal door at the bottom of his cell clicked open. The food slot. A hand appeared, holding something dark and rectangular. 2 minutes, a voice whispered. Make it count. A burner phone. Basic model. Isaiah's fingers closed around it as his mind raced through possibilities. The number was already dialed, ringing softly. Isaiah. The voice was familiar. Calm, precise, touched with a Virginia accent. Been a while since Kandahar. Daniel. Isaiah kept his voice low, angled away from the cell door. Didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Your message reached the right channels. Talk fast. What's the situation? Isaiah pressed against his aching ribs, organizing his thoughts. Elderly black woman named Evelyn Harper. Targeted by local police and Harbor Federal Bank. They staged an arrest, doctored footage, killed a whistleblower named Thomas Reed. Made it look like an overdose. The bank connection? Money laundering through police pension accounts. Reed had proof before they got to him. Everything's documented, but they seized my phone and files. Frost was silent for a moment. Isaiah could picture him, salt and pepper hair, reading glasses, deceptively casual posture hiding a tactical mind. The man had pulled Isaiah's team out of a Taliban ambush years ago. Now Isaiah needed extraction of a different kind. The woman, Harper, where is she? Same facility, different wing. She has a heart condition. They're denying her medication. Medical negligence. Gives us leverage. Frost's tone sharpened. Local involvement? Deep. Police chief, bank executives, at least 2 council members. They're desperate to contain this. New footsteps approached from the corridor, different from the guards, measured, deliberate. professional. Isaiah tensed. Years of training reading the subtle signals. Listen carefully, Frost said. Help is coming, but this gets ugly first. These people won't surrender power quietly. Are you prepared for that? Isaiah thought of Evelyn's bruised wrists, her scattered pearls on the church basement floor, her quiet dignity in the face of cruelty. Whatever it takes. Good. Maintain discipline. When it starts, let them throw the first punch. But finish it. The footsteps stopped outside Isaiah's cell. Keys jingled softly. They're here, Isaiah whispered. Remember, everything by the book, until they break it first. Then no mercy. Understood. Isaiah could hear Evelyn's voice from somewhere in the building, weak but still firm, asking again for her medication. His jaw tightened. Daniel, thank you. Save it for after. And Isaiah? Make it clean, but make it count. The line went dead. Isaiah slipped the phone back through the slot, just as it clicked shut. The footsteps outside his cell moved away, unhurried. Minutes stretched. Isaiah focused on his breathing, controlling the pain from his ribs, centering himself. More footsteps passed. Regular guards, irregular patterns now. Something was shifting in the jail's rhythm. Through the ventilation system, he caught fragments of radio chatter. New voices, new protocols. The night guard sounded uncertain, off balance. A woman's voice echoed from the medical wing, patient refusing treatment. Then Evelyn's voice, stronger than before. I refuse nothing. I demand my prescribed medication. Isaiah's fists clenched. They were pushing her toward a medical emergency, something they could blame on natural causes. A clean ending to their problem. But the footsteps in the corridor had changed again. More sets now. Different cadences. The sound of professionals moving with purpose. Somewhere above, a door slammed. Radio static crackled. A guard's voice. Sir, we have unauthorized personnel. Then the first alarm began to wail. The sound bounced off concrete walls, filling the cell block with red emergency lights. Isaiah stood, muscles coiled, face calm. Through his narrow window, he watched shadows move across the corridor, figures in tactical gear, moving with federal authority. More alarms joined the first, creating a rising chorus of panic. Radio calls overlapped. Lock it down! Who authorized? Multiple teams at all exits. Isaiah settled into a ready stance, ignoring his protesting ribs. The next few minutes would decide everything. Frost was right. It would get ugly before it got clean. But Isaiah had seen enough ugliness in this town, had watched enough good people suffer under corrupted power. The alarms reached a fever pitch as booted feet thundered through the lower levels. Isaiah breathed slowly, centered in the chaos. This wasn't revenge coming. This was consequence. This was justice, finding its teeth. The transport bay's fluorescent lights flickered, casting harsh shadows across concrete walls still damp from pre-dawn mist. Isaiah's handcuffs bit into his wrists as two deputies marched him down the echoing corridor. His ribs throbbed with each step, but he kept his face neutral, conserving energy. The bay doors opened with a metallic groan. Officer Denton stood inside, arm in a fresh cast, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Behind him, Officer Krieger leaned against the transport van, trying to project casualness but betraying tension in his shoulders. Two unfamiliar deputies flanked them, bigger men, faces Isaiah hadn't seen before. Surveillance is down for maintenance, Denton announced, his voice dripping with false professionalism. Might take an hour to reset the system. The bay doors swung shut with a heavy clang. Isaiah noticed the security camera's red light was already dark. He counted heartbeats, noting positions, analyzing angles. The transport van blocked one exit. 4 opponents. Limited space. Concrete floors that would punish any fall. Shame about the cameras, Krieger added, pushing off from the van. Lot can happen in an hour. Especially to prisoners who resist transfer. Isaiah kept his breathing steady as the deputies forced him toward the van. His chains rattled against the floor. Standard prison transport restraints, connecting handcuffs to ankle shackles. Restrictive, but not impossible to work with. He'd trained for worse. Denton stepped closer, showing teeth. Remember what I said about next time not ending clean? The first punch came from behind. A kidney shot that would have doubled over a normal man. Isaiah absorbed it, letting his body roll with the impact. The second hit targeted his injured ribs. Pain flared white-hot, but he remained upright, waiting. Nothing to say? Denton grabbed Isaiah's collar. No tough guy act now? Isaiah met his eyes calmly. You should have brought more men. The next few seconds exploded into violence. As Denton wound up for another punch, Isaiah dropped his weight suddenly, yanking his chains tight. The movement pulled one deputy off balance. Isaiah drove his shoulder up, catching the man's jaw with brutal force. Bone cracked. The deputy went down hard. Krieger lunged, but Isaiah was already moving. He twisted, wrapping his transport chain around Krieger's extended arm. One sharp pull sent the officer face first into the van's metal side. Blood sprayed from his broken nose. The second unknown deputy managed to land a solid hit to Isaiah's ribs. Fresh pain blazed, but adrenaline dulled it to background noise. Isaiah hooked his leg chain around the deputy's ankle and pulled. As the man stumbled, Isaiah drove his knee up, catching him under the chin. The deputy's head snapped back. He crumpled, unconscious before he hit the ground. "Stop him!" Denton's voice cracked with panic. He fumbled for his weapon, but his injured arm slowed him. Isaiah didn't give him time. He spun, gathering chain slack, and whipped it across Denton's face. The officer staggered. Isaiah pressed forward, ramming his shoulder into Denton's chest. They hit the concrete wall together. Before Denton could recover, Isaiah grabbed his cast and wrenched it backward. The snap of breaking bone echoed off concrete. Denton's scream followed, high and desperate. Krieger had recovered enough to draw his pistol. "Don't move! I'll shoot!" Isaiah was already moving. He dropped and rolled as the first shot cracked overhead. The transport chain tangled around Krieger's legs. One hard pull sent the officer sprawling. The gun skittered across concrete. Isaiah surged upward despite his restraints, driving his knee into Krieger's sternum. The officer gasped. Isaiah grabbed him by the throat and slammed his head against the floor. Once. Twice. Krieger went limp. The bay fell silent except for Denton's whimpers and the rattle of Isaiah's chains. Blood pooled slowly around the unconscious men. Suddenly, sirens wailed outside, different from the jail's internal alarms. Professional, federal, multiple vehicles converging fast. The bay doors burst open. Armed agents in tactical gear poured in, weapons raised, moving with practiced precision. Isaiah recognized their stance, their discipline. This wasn't local law enforcement. This was federal authority arriving with overwhelming force. "Federal agents, everyone on the ground!" Isaiah was already kneeling, hands raised despite his chains. More agents secured the unconscious deputies. Denton continued screaming as medics approached cautiously. A familiar figure stepped through the chaos. Daniel Frost's badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights as he surveyed the scene. His expression remained neutral, but Isaiah caught the slight nod of approval. "Get those restraints off him," Frost ordered. An agent quickly unlocked Isaiah's shackles. Denton thrashed as medics tried to stabilize his arm. "You can't do this! We're law enforcement!" "Former law enforcement," Frost corrected coldly. "Currently, you're under federal arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy, attempted murder, and about a dozen other charges my team will be happy to list while booking you." Isaiah rubbed his wrists as agents helped him up. His ribs protested, but the pain felt distant now. Around him, more federal personnel swept the bay, photographing evidence, securing the scene. Denton's screams echoed off the walls as they cuffed him despite his broken arm. Frost stepped closer, speaking quietly. "Clean enough for you?" "Clean enough," Isaiah agreed, watching as Krieger was dragged away unconscious. "Evelyn?" already secured. Medical teams with her now. Frost's eyes moved over the unconscious deputies. Quite a mess for a restrained man to make. They didn't search me very well, Isaiah said. Sloppy. Indeed. Frost allowed himself a small smile. Sloppy all around. But that's about to change. Red and blue lights flashed across Harbor Federal's polished windows as federal vehicles surrounded the building. The morning sun cast long shadows behind the agents as they moved with practiced efficiency, badges gleaming. Inside, chaos erupted as FBI cyber teams seized computers and federal marshals secured exits. Bank manager Elaine Porter's face drained of color when agents approached her office. "This is highly irregular. Our customers." "Ma'am, step aside," a senior agent ordered, showing her a warrant. "This branch is temporarily closed pending a federal investigation." In the server room, technicians worked methodically, cloning hard drives and securing backup tapes. Years of transaction records were extracted, each device carefully tagged and logged. The bank's carefully maintained facade crumbled as boxes of evidence emerged. Across town, in a dimly lit office at the Federal Command Center, Isaiah Cole sat beside Daniel Frost, watching unedited body cam footage on multiple screens. The raw video showed every second of Evelyn's arrest in brutal clarity. The unnecessary force, the deliberate humiliation, the casual cruelty in the officers' voices, frame by frame. Frost said quietly, "Everything they tried to hide." He pointed to one screen. "Watch Denton here. See how he positions himself? This wasn't procedure. This was a message." Isaiah's jaw tightened as he watched Evelyn's pills scatter across the marble floor again. They never thought anyone would see the real footage. "Corrupt departments get sloppy," Frost replied. "They backed up everything, thinking it protected them. Instead," he gestured at the wall of screens, "they documented their own crimes." A junior agent burst in, holding a tablet. "Sir, you need to see this. We found transfer records going back 15 years. The pension fund was being used to launder money through fake accounts. Multiple officials involved." Frost took the tablet, scanning quickly. Names? Police Chief Roberts, Mayor's office, 2 council members, Thompson and Walsh. And look at these dates. They line up perfectly with when Mrs. Harper was working as a bookkeeper. Isaiah leaned forward. "She saw something back then. That's why they've been watching her all these years. Waiting for a chance to discredit her," Frost agreed. "But they didn't count on you being there when they finally moved." At the local hospital, doctors worked to stabilize Evelyn's condition. The stress and lack of medication had nearly triggered heart failure. Isaiah visited as soon as she was cleared for visitors, finding her propped up in bed, looking frail but alert. "The federal people came," she said softly. "They apologized. Actually apologized." Isaiah pulled a chair close. "It's not over yet, but it's starting." On the small hospital room TV, breaking news banners flashed. Cameras captured FBI agents leading Police Chief Roberts out of the station in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage. Council members Thompson and Walsh were next, trying to hide behind lawyers as reporters shouted questions. Harbor Federal's executive team emerged from their offices with suit jackets covering their wrists, flanked by federal marshals. The bank's president, Timothy Morgan, stared straight ahead as cameras caught his walk of shame. Evelyn watched it all unfold, tears sliding silently down her weathered cheeks. Her hand found Isaiah's, squeezing weakly. "All these years," she whispered. "I thought I was crazy. They made me doubt everything I knew." "You were never crazy," Isaiah said firmly. "You were right. And now everyone sees it." The afternoon brought more arrests. Deputy chiefs, senior bank managers, city officials who had helped cover up the corruption. Each surrender and arrest was broadcast live, impossible to ignore or deny. Local news anchors who had reported Evelyn's aggression now backtracked frantically, highlighting the federal investigation's findings. In the hospital room, Evelyn's doctor checked her vitals as they watched more footage. Blood pressure's still high, she warned. Try to stay calm. But Evelyn couldn't look away from the screen. Unedited body cam video played now, showing her treatment in the bank. Public outrage exploded online. Social media filled with calls for justice. National news picked up the story. Look, Isaiah said softly, pointing to a new headline. Systemic corruption exposed. Elderly woman's arrest reveals years of police and banking fraud. Frost visited later that afternoon, bringing updates. The investigation was expanding. More witnesses came forward, emboldened by the arrests. Former bank employees revealed pressure to profile certain customers. Junior officers admitted to following orders targeting specific citizens. Mrs. Harper, Frost said formally, I want you to know, this goes beyond just clearing your name. You exposed something that's been poisoning this town for decades. Evelyn dabbed at fresh tears. I never wanted all this. I just wanted to be treated like a person. You deserved that and more, Isaiah said. They tried to make you invisible, but you stayed strong. The hospital room TV continued broadcasting arrests into the evening. Each new development validated what Evelyn had known, what she had endured alone for so long. The truth emerged in waves, washing away years of carefully constructed lies. As sunset painted the hospital room in soft orange light, Evelyn watched another report about the investigation. Her hand tightened around Isaiah's. They finally saw me, she whispered. The federal courthouse buzzed with anticipation. Every seat was filled, reporters packed the back wall, and sketch artists worked furiously as Judge Miranda Coleman prepared to speak. The morning light streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Evelyn Harper sat straight-backed in the front row, dressed in a pressed navy suit, her silver hair neatly styled. Isaiah Cole sat beside her, his presence steady and watchful. Behind them, rows of faces, community members, activists, and curious onlookers, waited in tense silence. Judge Coleman, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes, looked up from her papers. Her gaze swept the crowded courtroom before settling on Evelyn. Mrs. Harper, she began, her voice clear and firm. Please rise. Evelyn stood slowly, Isaiah's hand at her elbow for support. The room seemed to hold its breath. In my 30 years on the bench, Judge Coleman continued, I have seen many instances of misconduct, but what happened to you represents a particularly egregious abuse of power. The evidence presented shows a systematic campaign of harassment, intimidation, and racial discrimination spanning decades. She lifted a document. I am hereby dismissing all charges against you with prejudice. Furthermore, I want to state for the record that the behavior exhibited by law enforcement and banking officials in this case was not merely unprofessional, it was criminal. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Several rows back, former Officer Denton's face darkened with rage. His arm, still in a cast, twitched visibly. The settlements agreed upon today, the judge continued, total $12 million in compensatory and punitive damages. Harbor Federal Bank's charter is permanently revoked. The police department will undergo complete restructuring under federal oversight for a minimum of 5 years. She paused, removing her glasses. Mrs. Harper, I want to apologize to you personally. The system meant to protect you instead became a weapon against you. That ends today. Evelyn's shoulders trembled slightly, but she remained composed. Isaiah's presence behind her was like a wall of quiet strength. For the defendants, Judge Coleman's voice hardened. Sentencing will begin next week. Former officers Denton and Krieger face multiple federal charges, as do Police Chief Roberts and the other co-conspirators. I intend to make examples of every person who participated in this corruption. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Court is adjourned. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as Evelyn turned from the bench. Her attorney, a federal prosecutor named Sarah Chen, smiled warmly and squeezed her hand. Outside the courtroom, a wall of reporters waited, microphones extended. Mrs. Harper, how do you feel about the verdict? Will you comment on the police department's future? What are your plans for the settlement? Evelyn paused at the top of the courthouse steps, sunlight warming her face. The crowd below fell quiet, waiting. Isaiah stood slightly behind her, scanning faces, ever vigilant. I don't want to talk about money, Evelyn said clearly, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering. I want to talk about dignity, about being seen as human. That's what was stolen from me, not just by those officers or that bank, but by a system that looked away for far too long. More cameras flashed. She continued steadily. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in change, real change, so no one else has to fight this hard just to be treated with basic respect. A reporter called out, "Are you angry about what happened?" Evelyn's expression remained composed. Anger burns you up inside. I chose to stand my ground instead. Sometimes that's harder than fighting back. The federal prosecutor stepped forward to handle additional questions. Evelyn moved carefully through the crowd, Isaiah clearing a path. They reached the bottom of the steps where Daniel Frost waited beside a black SUV. Ready to go home? He asked quietly. Evelyn nodded. More than ready. As they drove through town, they passed Harbor Federal Bank. The signs were already being removed, the windows papered over. Workers loaded boxes into trucks as federal agents supervised. They'll open a community credit union there, Frost mentioned. The settlement includes provisions for local financial services. Isaiah watched Evelyn's reaction in the rearview mirror. She stared at the building that had caused so much pain, her expression thoughtful. Good, she said finally. People still need a bank. Just one that serves everyone equally. They passed the police station next, where moving trucks were also present. The department's reorganization had already begun. New leadership would arrive next week, along with federal oversight teams. Frost spoke again. The sentencing recommendations are strong. Denton and Krieger are looking at significant time. The chief and council members, too. The system didn't fix itself, Isaiah said quietly. It had to be forced. No, Evelyn agreed, but it did finally bend toward justice. Sometimes that's all we can ask for. That truth eventually comes to light. They pulled up to Evelyn's house. The front yard had been replanted with fresh flowers, erasing the vandalism from weeks before. New security cameras monitored the property discreetly. Isaiah's addition. Frost opened her door. There will be more media attention in the coming weeks. We can provide protection if you want it. I'm not hiding anymore, Evelyn said firmly. She stood straighter now, the weight of fear lifted from her shoulders. The morning sun caught the silver in her hair like a crown. She turned to Isaiah, who had been her quiet guardian through it all. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. Now I can breathe again. The autumn morning painted Harbor Street in warm golden light. The brick facade of the newly renovated building gleamed, its fresh paint and polished windows a stark contrast to the shuttered Harbor Federal Bank across the way. A modest crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, their quiet conversations creating a gentle murmur in the crisp air. Evelyn Harper stood near the entrance, elegant in a deep purple dress, her silver hair catching the sunlight. At 72, she carried herself with renewed strength, the shadows of fear long gone from her eyes. Community leaders, local residents, and even a few reporters formed a half-circle around her. Sarah Chen, the federal prosecutor who had become a friend, stood at the podium. Today marks more than just the opening of a financial institution, she announced, her voice carrying clearly. It represents the triumph of dignity over discrimination, of justice over corruption, and of community over greed. From a bench across the street, Isaiah Cole watched silently. His injuries from the jail transport bay had healed, leaving only faint scars to mark the battle. He'd traded his tactical gear for simple civilian clothes, but his alertness remained unchanged, eyes constantly scanning the surroundings out of habit. Daniel Frost stepped up beside him, keeping his voice low. The last sentencing was yesterday. Denton got 18 years. Krieger took a plea for 12. The chief and council members are looking at decades. Isaiah nodded once, his expression unchanged. The system worked this time. Because you made it work, Frost replied. You heading out today? Soon as this is done. Across the street, Mayor Patricia Wilson, newly elected after the scandal, gestured to a covered plaque beside the entrance. It is my honor to dedicate this institution to a woman whose courage reminded us all what justice really means. Evelyn stepped forward, grasping the cord. With one smooth motion, she unveiled the bronze plaque. Evelyn Harper Community Credit Union, where everyone's dignity matters. Applause rippled through the crowd. Someone started a cheer that others quickly joined. Evelyn's eyes glistened, but her smile remained steady as she accepted the ceremonial scissors. "Cut it, Mrs. Harper," called a voice from the crowd. "Show that ribbon who's boss." Laughter spread warmly. Evelyn's hands didn't shake as she positioned the scissors. The red ribbon parted with a crisp snick, and more cheers erupted. Camera flashes sparked like stars. Isaiah watched as people began filing inside for the reception. The building's interior had been completely transformed. Gone were the imposing counters and bulletproof glass of Harbor Federal. Instead, warm woods and comfortable seating created a welcoming space. The teller's stations were open and accessible, designed for conversation rather than confrontation. "You should go in," Frost suggested. "You earned this victory too." Isaiah shook his head slightly. This is her moment. Better without complications. But before he could stand, Evelyn was crossing the street toward him. She moved more easily now, her steps light with newfound freedom. The morning sun caught her face, highlighting a piece that had been missing in those first dark days at the bank. She settled onto the bench beside him, smoothing her skirt. "Leaving without saying goodbye?" "Not really my kind of party," Isaiah replied softly. "No, I suppose not." Evelyn studied his face. "You know, most people would have walked away that day, would have decided it wasn't their problem. Most people haven't seen what happens when good people look away." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "What you did, stepping in, staying when it got ugly, that wasn't just about justice. It was about seeing someone's humanity when others wouldn't." Isaiah shifted slightly, uncomfortable with praise. "You did the hard part, standing your ground day after day, year after year. That takes more courage than anything I did." "Different kinds of courage," Evelyn said. "Both necessary." She reached into her purse and withdrew a small envelope. "Before you go, I want you to have this." Isaiah accepted it reluctantly. Inside was a single key. "There's a cottage on Lake Morrison," she explained. "Part of the settlement. It's quiet there, peaceful. The kind of place where a person might find some rest, if they wanted it." "Mrs. Harper." "Evelyn," she corrected gently. "And I'm not asking you to stay, just letting you know you have a place here, if you ever need it." Isaiah turned the key over in his hands, feeling its weight. Across the street, laughter spilled from the credit union's open doors. Children darted between adults' legs, playing tag on the sidewalk. The scene was ordinary, unremarkable, exactly what had been denied here for so long. "I should go," he said finally, standing. "They'll be looking for you inside." Evelyn rose as well, straightening her dress. "Take care of yourself, Isaiah Cole, and thank you, not just for what you did, but for who you are." He nodded once, tucking the key into his pocket. No other words were needed. They had both seen truth prevail, had watched justice grind slow but inexorable. Some victories didn't need speeches. Isaiah turned and walked away, his steps unhurried. Behind him, he could hear Evelyn being called back to the celebration, could hear the happy chaos of new beginnings. He didn't look back. This wasn't his story anymore. It belonged to the community now, to the people who would build something better from the ashes of corruption. A few blocks away, his packed duffel waited in the truck. He had other battles to fight, other wrongs to right. But the key in his pocket felt like a promise, not of home exactly, but of possibility, of peace earned through justice. The sound of laughter followed him down the street, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victory wasn't in the fight itself, but in what grew afterward. Dignity restored, community rebuilt, humanity recognized. Across from the new credit union, Evelyn settled onto a sunny bench. Her expression was serene as she watched families enter the building she had helped create. Not through violence or vengeance, but through the simple, powerful act of refusing to back down. Justice had finally come, undeniable and complete. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.